Hello and welcome to This World with me, Vikram Chandra. First of all, a very happy new year to all of you. And what better time to launch this very special show than the first week of our brand new year. Now, what is this show all about? Well, it's a connected world. When China has a COVID outbreak, it affects all of us. If supply chains get disrupted, it affects all of us. If climate change destroys the planet, it will definitely affect all of us. This year, India will become the most populous country in the world. It is already among the top 5 countries by GDP. India's perspective on events in the world matters. And on this show, we look at this world through India's perspective, through the eyes of the world's biggest democracy. This is the show where we will talk to global newsmakers, look at the week's biggest global stories, and tell you what they mean for India and what they mean for the world. This week on This World, we look at how a new year is beginning with another COVID scare out of China. In our first story tonight, we speak to a Chinese virologist who was forced to flee her country as the WHO itself issues a statement doubting the COVID data coming out of China. We ask her what the real situation is in China. What percentage of the Chinese population has actually fallen sick with COVID? How are hospitals coping? What is the real risk to the rest of the world? We also speak to Dr. Amita Gupta, the head of infectious disease at the world's premier medical institute, Johns Hopkins. We will ask her whether China is being ravaged by a new variant of COVID or whether this is something we already have got some immunity to. And we will ask her what you should do to stay safe in these times. Next up, what seems to be the leading soap opera on this world, and I'm talking about the British royal family. What will Prince Harry reveal in his upcoming biography? The book released in just 4 days from now, and from what we hear, the context and the content is explosive, including details of what Harry calls a physical attack on him by the next King of England, his brother William. Also joining me tonight is a young Indian man who's managed to solve a 2,500-year-old Sanskrit puzzle. His name is Rishi Rajpopat, and I can't wait to introduce you to him. So let's get started. I'm Vikram Chandra, and you're watching WION World is One. We begin in China. On the 8th of January, China is relaxing its travel rules. Those coming into China will no longer need to quarantine, meaning for those living in China, foreign travel becomes much easier. And foreign travel is what many Chinese have begun packing for. Flight bookings are up, so are visa inquiries. For the people of China, the relaxing of travel rules means liberation. It means getting to step out after 3 long years and after all these years of COVID rules. But for those living outside China, the prospect of so many incoming Chinese flights means, well, some worry and some possible mayhem. Let me tell you why. You see, last week, 2 Chinese flights landed in Milan. Half of the passengers were found to be infected with COVID. Last weekend, 28% of Chinese passengers flying into Taiwan tested positive. Ideally, these travelers should have furnished RT-PCR test results before boarding their flights. Look, Chinese people are allowed to travel wherever they want to. Obviously, there can be no discrimination. But let's face it, there is a difference in China to the rest of the world. There is a COVID pandemic raging in China, the likes of which the world hasn't seen. Millions and millions of people are infected. So therefore, it is correct for the rest of the world to be asking some questions. Were the people who were flying out of China asked to do any testing? Did they furnish RT-PCR tests? COVID-19 cases are rising in China, and that's even according to official data. And I don't need to tell you this, you already know this. China is not sharing enough data. Beijing, as you know, operates in secrecy. It thrives in mystery. These, for example, are distressing videos of deaths surfacing from China. But China maintains not too many people are dying of COVID-19 at all. It's redefined what a COVID death means. The World Health Organization itself has now stepped up and pulled up China for undercounting COVID deaths. It's also questioned the methodology that is being used out there. And all this time, reports are saying at least 70% of Shanghai residents have tested positive. So what does this actually mean for the rest of the world? For countries like India, which may not have too many Chinese tourists coming in, but which are definitely affected by arrivals from East Asia, from other parts of East Asia, from places where Chinese travelers could be going to. Now, should we worry or should we not worry? Let me give you my take. There are two possible scenarios. Scenario one, what we are seeing in China is just the logical outcome of the collapse of the zero COVID policy. With China opening up, hundreds of millions of Chinese will get COVID. It's natural. It's happened elsewhere in the world as well. But if the variants that are emerging from all of this are the same as the ones that we have already been exposed to, then the rest of the world should be okay because you've got some immunity. And there are some indications that this is what is happening. Some signs that what is hitting China are Omicron subvariants. The first one called BA.5.2, the second one BF.7. The world does not know all that much about these variants, but the rest of the world should have some protection because this is Omicron and most of us have had Omicron or are vaccinated against it. Now, the frightening scenario is if a new variant completely emerges from China, perhaps as a result of mutation with so many fresh infections. Now, if that happens, then all of our existing immunity could go out of the window, and then we could be back with a COVID crisis in the rest of the world itself. Now, what is actually going to happen? Well, difficult to tell simply because we have no idea of what is actually and really happening in China. And we can't believe what Beijing is telling us. And that's not me just saying this, that's the WHO itself saying it doesn't entirely believe what is happening in China and what the data is that is coming out. So let me put this question to Dr. Li Mingyan. She's a virologist from China who's investigated the origins of COVID-19. Her findings did not please those in positions of power in Beijing, so Dr. Li had to flee her homeland. Tonight, she joins us from the United States. Well, it's always such a pleasure talking to you, Dr. Li Mingyan. Just trying to understand what the exact situation is inside China, because we're not completely being told what the data is. The WHO also says it doesn't know what exactly is happening. We were talking to you a few weeks back as well, and we were trying to understand how bad the situation actually is. What are you hearing from your sources on the ground? How bad is the situation?
Several weeks ago, and since then until now, still the COVID cases is actually infected majority of Chinese people, and also the death toll is increasing. And the more important is the white lung, the typical pneumonia happened during COVID-19, especially back to early 2020, become worse and worse based on the feedback from hospitals. We are talking about the real number or real death toll. We really cannot have that because first, China government still refuse to give the real data, and they claim only 3 cases of the COVID deaths on 2nd January all over China. However, we know that the funeral place in many places are overloaded, and we see the local people feedback, and they said it's like 5 times or even 10 times more dead bodies every day come to the funeral place.
Let's say what you're saying is correct. More than half of China has got COVID. You're talking about 700 million people, 800 million people actually getting COVID in the last few weeks. And if you're not seeing millions of people dying, then that actually means it's not some scary, new, dangerous variant. It's probably some sort of an Omicron variant or one of the earlier variants, because the fatality rate then isn't that high. If hundreds of millions of people are getting COVID and you're not getting lakhs of deaths or tens of thousands of deaths or millions of deaths, then that means it's not a very dangerous variant.
First, you should know it takes time for the disease develop, especially for the 20 to 60 years old group, right? So first, China government deny all the COVID cases. We only can estimate it based on feedback from patients' family member, hospital, and especially the funeral place statistic. However, now even in the funeral place, government forbids them to talk about the number. We know that they complain they have to burn the bodies, like even a couple of bodies have to mix together to do the cremate. And also the queue to cremate the bodies is long. Even people has to take at least 7 days. This is the data last week. This week, someone said in Shanghai or other cities, even they were told to wait until February to get criminated.
Okay, so Dr. Lee, let me tell you, the reason I'm asking you all of these questions is actually very simple. The rest of the world in the new year is looking at what's happening in China and is worrying, obviously, that what does this mean for us? Is 2023 going to be another year when we're going to be grappling with COVID and horrible new variants are going to come? Or can we relax a little bit? And there are two scenarios, as I began by saying. Scenario one, because China is relaxing now and because it's done away with zero COVID, there will be a large number of cases in China. But the rest of the world does not have to worry too much or panic too much because these are the same old variants that we have already got some immunity to. So be watchful, but don't panic. The second scenario would be if there is a new variant in China or a mutation leads to a new variant in China, which can override our existing immunity, because then there is a real reason to worry. Something else could emerge, something more dangerous than Omicron, more dangerous than Delta. Is there any reason, according to you, to believe that the second scenario, the latter scenario, the scary scenario, could be playing out?
Assume that there are new variants. First is, I say new variant doesn't mean it has to be far away from Omicron. What we say that is because although we talk about lifting of the zero COVID policy, we talk about the vaccine ineffectiveness, however, that it cannot explain that all of a sudden people get infected in a very fast speed and also generate such severe symptoms. Because just one thing, imagine back to 2020, when people totally has no any immunity against the COVID-19. And then at that time, the situation seems better than at this moment, at least in the cities I know. And the doctors also claim that now it's worse than back to 2020. And also we have to think about China government. Why, if it's just the common Omicron, why doesn't the China government allow hospital to give the viral sequence examination? No such PCR testing allowed now. So the thing is, the government insists even back to November, it's just the Omicron, what you know in your country is mild. And they tell you the death is only the cost for China to reopen. And also our government, China government, blame other countries if you want to just do some basic restriction to test the patients to check whether there will be risk for your citizens. And also, when you check the China CDC statement, one thing you should be very aware of, that is they claim there will be the super immune escape variant coming out soon. And that was predicted very well by the Chinese Communist scientists. So the government said, don't worry, if it come out later, which can escape all your immunity, China already prepared the drug for you, which will be the only useful mono antibody or drugs, and it's already in manufacturing. So the thing is, we are still working on more information with our sources. But when China tell you that this is nothing you should worry, you should think about that.
Well, Dr. Lee, I think that's something we're certainly going to have to think about. A super immune escape variant is the single biggest nightmare, I think, that everyone has, and that's what people are looking for. Let's certainly hope that that doesn't happen, but we're going to be looking out for that and watching China very closely to see in case that is really what is going to emerge. As I said, there's no evidence that is emerging right now, but we'll certainly keep an eye on that. And we'll keep coming back to you, Dr. Lee, as well, because you do have your finger on the pulse of what's happening inside China. Very difficult for the rest of us to keep an eye on it or try to figure out what's happening inside China. If the WHO cannot, then, certainly the rest of the world is struggling. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, so that's the situation in China. And it is the possibility of that new variant, which is why everyone is so concerned. Also, let's remember, if there are so many new cases in any country as are happening in China right now, there is the possibility for mutation. So the variant doesn't have to be there today. The variant could come tomorrow in case there are new mutations. That's something to keep an eye on. Now, countries around the world are already bracing for an impact. Several countries have announced that travelers from China will have to show negative RT-PCR tests. India is one of these countries. Then you have Morocco, which has actually banned Chinese flights altogether. China is not taking these measures well. Beijing has said it will slap countermeasures on countries who are testing Chinese passengers or asking them for negative RT-PCR. Now, what gives? How can China possibly tell another country what it can and what it cannot do to protect its own, especially because China has just spent 2.5 to 3 years cracking down on all movement from the rest of the world because of its zero COVID policy. So, I mean, I think a certain fairness has to be there. That's not exactly the way things work. The truth is, the world cannot afford another wave. The pandemic has already cost us too much, and it's been ongoing for way too long. Let's just recap in case you've forgotten what we've been through.
The year is 2019. The place, Wuhan. People are suddenly falling sick. There is a mysterious virus, one that the world knows nothing about, just that the symptoms are flu-like and it is deadly. Before we know it, the virus jumps border. A person from Thailand tests positive. The chain reaction catches more countries and victims off guard. On the 20th of January, South Korea confirms its first case. The next day, Taiwan and Hong Kong. On the 22nd of January, it's Macau. On the 30th of January, India confirms its first case. The same day, the World Health Organization declares that the outbreak is a public health emergency of international concern.
I'm declaring a public health emergency of international concern over the global outbreak of novel coronavirus.
PHEIC. Not many knew what that meant. They understood it through the horror stories that followed, like the virus hit Diamond Princess cruise ship, whose passengers were stranded off the coast of Japan for 2 weeks. There were 3,711 people on board. 712 of them became infected. On the 11th of March 2020, the WHO declares the coronavirus a pandemic.
We have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
It's too little, too late. By now, cases have been reported in most countries. Many have declared nationwide lockdowns. The next day, India records its first COVID death. By the 13th of March, 5,000 people die of the virus. What follows are border closures, collapse of healthcare, economy, supply chains, and mental health. 66 million people have died of COVID-19 so far. That's more than the entire population of France or Italy, Tanzania, South Africa, or South Korea. 665 million people have been infected with the virus. That's almost double the population of America. Can the world afford a repeat? Like it or not, China is out there trying to infect the world. COVID-19 cases have surged across China. There is a new variant, but China is not sharing numbers or information. Passengers traveling from China are testing positive. Half of the passengers in 2 flights from China tested positive in Milan, which was also the first European city to fall during the first wave. Is history repeating itself? And should the world be worried?
So what should the rest of the world do to avoid a repeat of all of that? Well, let's just ask Dr. Amita Gupta. She is the Chief of the Division of Infectious Disease at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. Dr. Gupta, joining us right now from the United States. Thank you so much for being with us. Welcome to the show. Wanted to get your sense of what is happening in China. How bad is it there? Because the data is not clearly coming out, and the WHO itself says we're not sure about the data. No one seems to know what is the situation there, how bad is it the old variant, is it a new variant, how many people are dying? Nothing seems to be very clear.
Yeah, so great question, Vikram. And thank you for having me again. It's a pleasure to be here. You know, I wish I could say I have the numbers, right? I think part of the challenge is that we really don't have transparency around the caseload, whether it be the hospitalizations, the deaths that are occurring. What we are sort of fairly certain of is that there's a significant underestimation that's occurring between what China's reporting officially to the global sort of media and WHO and others, and what's being seen with images that are, you know, being shared on social media and coming out from various forums where photographs of hospitals show that, you know, right from the emergency rooms to the wards, they're full of patients. They've also shown crematoria really working around the clock, as well as a body bag. So the numbers that are being reported officially, you know, anywhere from 5 to 9 deaths, you know, over the past week are far, far below what we actually think is going on currently. What we do also know is that the variants, because just recently on January 3rd, the China CDC shared their sequence data from the first 2,000 genomes and found that these are all Omicron subvariants, BA5 and BF7. So we don't think that there's new variants currently circulating, because that's been a concern.
Now, that's an aspect that I want to talk to you about and talk to you about it in some detail, because let's just do some scenario mapping. Scenario one, as I've been saying, China's not had that much herd immunity, not had too much COVID because of zero COVID. You're suddenly opening up and there's bound to be a surge in COVID cases, and therefore there will be people coming to hospitals. There will be a large number of deaths, and almost certainly way more than what China is saying. But the rest of the world doesn't necessarily need to panic, because, as you said, this is still Omicron. These are still old variants. The rest of the world has been exposed to them. There is some immunity to them. So therefore, don't panic, look at it, have concern, but relax. Don't panic right now. When you panic is a potential new variant that escapes immunity. A situation that Dr. Lee was just now scaring us with. Of these two possible scenarios, which of them is looking more likely to you?
Yeah, so I think currently the current scenario based on the available data is that it's Omicron subvariants which are circulating elsewhere. And we know these variants are more transmissible and have some immune evasion because not all the current vaccine products have this Omicron variants in them, right? But we know that hybrid immunity is far stronger in much of the world, as you just mentioned. So I would say that for the time being, where there's no need to panic, but what the concern is that with such a huge surge of infections, which we're anticipating is occurring, there's always the risk of new variants emerging, right? We see how quickly that happens. Within days to weeks, you can get a new variant and that can quickly displace the current scenario. But we're not at that point yet, that's for sure.
So I'm just trying to understand the last point you made, and it's an important point. You're saying that if it is the same variant, as seems to be the situation right now, then that's okay. But if 700 million Chinese or 800 million Chinese get COVID, so many more cases, so much more of the virus circulating, the probability or the possibility of a fresh mutation becomes a lot more likely. And that's when you can have something like Delta, which emerged last year. And that is something that is the worrying scenario for the rest of the world.
Yeah, that's what I am saying. I mean, I think that we know the virus can mutate. And the question is, will it mutate into a more concerning form? That's possible. But right now, Omicron and its subvariants have dominated for the last several months. And so, you know, past year plus, right? So we haven't had, despite a lot of infection occurring in waves, while there have been variants that have been generated, we haven't yet gone beyond Omicron. But I agree. With such a large population, so many infections, it just gives the virus the chance to mutate.
So your advice to people, therefore, in 2023 for now, what would that advice be? Can I keep going to watch my sports matches? Can I keep going to restaurants? Can I party? Should I wear a mask at the metro? Should I wear it on public transport? Can I lead my life? It's January 2023. Can I lead my life?
Yeah, well, already people are really. I think everyone's fatigued of COVID, but it's not unreasonable when you do have local surges, when you're in crowded scenarios, to wear a mask. So, like, for example, I still wear a mask in the hospital. I also wear a mask when I'm in a crowded metro or, in a small space which doesn't have great circulation. We are now living with COVID, and we are each calculating what personal risk do we have. Now, if I was someone who's immunocompromised or was on cancer chemotherapy or had, some other disease where I didn't have a normal immune system, I absolutely would be far more careful. I would be wearing my mask pretty much all the time, because even with vaccination, I'm not fully protected and I can get really sick. So each of us is making an individual risk calculation. And I think if you're older, 80 or older, again, you want to be far more careful than if you're a younger person without any illnesses.
So that brings us back to vaccinations and boosters. Now, here in India right now, there's a debate taking place on whether you should get a second booster or not. Actually, first booster is a no-brainer. Everyone should get that first booster, what we call a precaution shot, if they haven't. And here in India, there are a large number of people who haven't taken that precaution shot, and they should. But what is your view on a second booster? Should everyone take a second booster now?
Yeah, so I think that it's certainly because of the waning immunity. So if you have not had either natural infection or at least 6 months since your last vaccine, and there's an increased uptick of cases, that's a time to absolutely get an additional booster. And I will say that in several scenarios around the world, we are advocating an additional booster, a fourth booster, just because of this idea of waning immunity and these ongoing surges that we're seeing.
All right, Dr. Gupta, thank you so much for joining us. 8th of January, just 2 days away. If countries want to hold their shield up, they need to do it now. If countries want to protect their own from whatever is happening and the risk of a new COVID variant, they need to take steps. But I think what we are just hearing from the scientists is there's no reason to panic, not just yet. Take precautions, but don't panic. And let's now move on to our second segment, the longest running soap opera in the world, the British royal family. And of course, now the people are really contributing to it a lot. Prince Harry, Meghan Markle. Prince Harry is going back in time and recalling some sour incidents. He's about to come out with a new book. It's coming out in just 4 days' time. Prince Harry alleges he was assaulted and beaten up by his elder brother, Prince William, who's going to be the next King of England. He also alleges that the infamous Nazi outfit that he wore to a party in 2005 was on the recommendation of his brother William and his sister-in-law Kate Middleton. He's spoken about killing people in Afghanistan, 25 Taliban members. A lot is there apparently in this book, and all of these explosive claims are going to be part of Harry's memoir. In this new book, Spare, Harry apparently writes that William, quote-unquote, grabbed me by the collar, ripping my necklace and knocked me to the floor. I landed on the dog's bowl, which cracked under my back, the pieces cutting into me. I lay there for a moment, dazed, and then got to my feet, and I told him to get out. Harry goes on to say that the attack resulted in visible injury and that William asked him not to talk about it to Harry's wife, actor Meghan Markle. You don't need to tell Meg about this, William told Harry, he recalls. You mean you attacked me? I didn't attack you, William replies. Look, essentially a blow-by-blow account of everything that happened. All of this is coming out in the Spare. I'm sure you're going to be reading it, just as many people have actually been seeing the entire soap opera playing itself out on Netflix. Now, I have to say, opinions are starting to get very polarized on all of this. There are people, and we're going to be speaking to one of them just in a short while from now, who believe that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have been treated very unfairly by the press for sure, unfairly by the royal family, and they've been treated badly, and they're entitled to say their point of view. Now, of course, they're entitled to give their side of the story. But there are also others who are out there saying, hasn't this gone on a bit too far? If the real complaint of Prince Harry, Meghan Markle was there's too much intrusion into our privacy, why are every aspects of our life being laid bare? what exactly is happening out here? There have been interview after interview, Oprah and others. There have been a 6-part Netflix series out there. There's now this book which is coming out, which will probably, sell and be read by millions of people. Excruciating details of everything. A lot of people fight with their brothers and sisters, or a lot of things happen in family. In this case, it's now not just the washing of dirty linen. It is actually the examination of every stain on that dirty linen with a magnifying glass, chemical analysis of what the stain has, and all of this being put out in the rest of the world. Is it going to work? But perhaps, look, this sells, let's face it. The royal family sells, the scandals around the royal family sells. That Netflix documentaries did really well, and presumably this book is also going to sell in the millions. So what exactly is happening out here? The misunderstood couple which has been driven out of their family and treated really badly by the press and by the family? Or is this somebody who's now complaining too much, whining too much, dare it be said, as I've heard some people saying? I guess the jury is going to be out on this. But look, the story itself, the entire interest around the royal family, I'm not sure it's going to go away. It's often been said in the past, people are getting tired of the royal family. They don't want to hear anymore. This is a story that we've heard before. Let's just give you a quick recap, shall we?
On the 19th of May 2018, when American actor Meghan Markle walked down the aisle of the St. George's Chapel at Windsor, the world thought the royal family was taking slow steps towards progress. This was a woman of colour who had been married before and who was now becoming one of the senior-most members of the British royal family. Meghan, Harry, William and Kate together became the Fab Four, the future faces of the royal family. But it didn't take too many months before cracks began appearing. Rumour mill said there were rifts between Meghan Markle and the Princess of Wales, Kate Middleton. Some reports claimed that Prince Harry and Prince William were not getting along. There was a viral video of Prince William seemingly ignoring Meghan. It surfaced around the same time as reports of Harry feeling William was not rolling out the red carpet for Meghan. By early 2019, a documentary had become the talk of the town. It screamed, "Kate versus Meghan, are the princesses at war?" No one knew, and the palace was tight-lipped. In the documentary, though, a royal watcher said that Prince William was concerned about Harry's relationship with Meghan Markle before the two wed. Harry supposedly was ballistic and accused his brother of wrecking his relationship before it even began. The royals added to the speculations when William and Prince Harry decided to split their households and offices. William remained at Kensington Palace. Harry and Meghan moved to their new official residence, the Frogmore Cottage. The transition was complete by April 2019. The same month, a Sunday Times report claimed that Harry and Meghan were planning to relocate to Africa. In the recent Netflix docu-series, Harry said they indeed were, but the story was planted in order to pour cold water on their plan. Then came this video. It's Easter Day 2019, and all's clearly not well between the two brothers. In October 2019 came another documentary. In it, Harry said he does not see his brother as much as he used to, adding he still loves William dearly. So what exactly was happening? The British press has many answers, and in all of them, the villain was Meghan Markle. A foreigner who was wrecking the British royal family. It did not help her case when in November 2019 it became clear that Harry and Meghan will not be spending Christmas with the royal family at Sandringham. Instead, they will be visiting Meghan's mom. 2020 began with a bombshell announcement. Harry and Meghan said they would step back from their senior royal duties. The announcement was made on the Sussexes' Instagram handle. What was it supposed to mean? Megxit, said the British public. This was a breakup in the royal family. And just like Brexit, the terms and conditions were blurry. What next? Reports said William was miffed because he was blindsided. Queen Elizabeth II too reportedly only learned from the Sussexes' decision from Instagram. It's been 2 years. Today, the two brothers live different lives in different countries and continents. Yet, there seems to be a constant duel for attention. One tours America, another releases the trailer of their Netflix docuseries. One goes on an image-building exercise, another counts down to the release of the book, promising to tell the world the real story about the British royals. But who's really lining up outside the bookstore?
Well, as I was just saying a short while back, a lot of people starting to lose sympathy with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. But Kristen Meinzer now joins us with a slightly different point of view. She's a very prominent royal watcher, podcaster, joining us from New Zealand actually right now. But she's been writing a lot about this and has, I think, a fair amount of sympathy, I think, for the position that the Sussexes actually catch themselves in. Now, Kristen, I don't know if you've read the book already. The leaks are coming out thick and fast. Lots and lots of stories of assault and what have you. It sounds as if it's going to be a rather explosive book coming out in 3 or 4 days.
Yes, the book is out on the 10th. And according to Penguin Random House, which is publishing the book, they've put out press releases that are essentially saying that Harry just wants to tell his side of the story, and not just as a royal, but as a human being, as a man, as a father, as a son. And I think that's what we can look forward to, is getting his perspective more as a human and not just as the face of an institution.
Now, we've seen some sense of what is there in the book already. I mean, it's out there on your Twitter feed as well. Prominently, this entire talk about a physical fight and assault that he says that, Prince William attacked him, and many other details that we're now starting to hear about. These were not there in the Netflix documentary or opera or any other such thing. These have been presumably kept for the book.
Oh, well, that fight, that physical altercation you speak of, is probably the most explosive thing that has been leaked so far. Penguin Random House has kept everything under lock and key. They've been very strict about making sure nobody has access to this book. So a lot of us were really shocked that The Guardian had access to these snippets at all. It really is surprising to those of us who are royal reporters and royal watchers. We've had every request denied to have advanced clips of the book given to us. So it's quite shocking that somehow The Guardian got access to portions of this book. And yeah, that physical altercation you speak of, William attacked Harry after a fight over Meghan Markle. William said some very uncharitable things about Meghan, and then attacked Harry in Harry's own home, ripped off his necklace, grabbed his collar, threw him on the ground so forcefully that Harry ended up breaking a dog dish and getting injuries from it. And so that's the most explosive thing we've heard so far. But if we've gotten that snippet from the book, I imagine there's going to be more of that. I imagine that that's not the only shocking bit that we will hear about Harry with his brother or with his father.
Okay, Kristen, you use the word shocking, but I know there are lots of brothers who will be watching this and saying, look, okay, they are princes, they are royal family, presumably they're expected to behave in a certain manner, but brothers do fight, right? Okay, they're older now, maybe you have physical fisticuffs when you're much younger, but there are people who will watch this and saying, my brother's done that to me fairly frequently, we have fights, these things happen. These things happen in a family. A lot of this stuff which is coming out in the press, presumably because they are royal family, but a lot of this is stuff that does happen in families.
Oh, absolutely. We've all seen little boys tussle with each other, 4, 5, 6 years old, maybe even as teenagers, but we're talking about two grown men in their 30s. And really, I don't see healthy families usually getting in these kinds of physical altercations where injuries take place. I absolutely expected of little boys tussling with each other, but I think that this is not normal. And it also, the fact that this physical altercation included name calling and accusations about, that William was throwing at Harry about his wife. I think this is not normal.
So, okay, there obviously seem to be two camps very clearly, and there seem to be very strong opinions on both sides. Now, there is, of course, a particular point of view. So if I could, let's play devil's advocate with you, it is to say the following. Look, Harry and Meghan have been expressing their side of the story extensively, almost in excruciating, painful detail. opera, then there's a full 6-part documentary, now a book. And if all of this is about, let's maintain privacy and we want privacy in our lives, they have been exposing all aspects of their life and at great lengths for months now, if not years altogether. So something is not quite adding up in this story.
Well, I think there's a difference between invasion of privacy, having one's mail intercepted and published in the Mail on Sunday or the Daily Mail, having members of your family stalked by the paparazzi, having the tabloids write racist, misogynistic, fake stories about you. I think that is an invasion of privacy. Choosing to tell one's own story, that's not an invasion of privacy. That's a right that we all have. And in fact, it is a right that has been practiced by other members of the royal family. Lest we forget, in the 1990s, Princess Di told her story to a biographer, as well as during her famous interview that we all know of today. But also Prince Charles did the same thing. He had an aired primetime TV interview with Jonathan Dimbleby, who he collaborated on also in a tell-all book. And so Harry's not the first person to do this. He's not the first member of the royal family who wants to keep things, private to a certain extent, but also tell his own story.
Okay, look, I get that. And look, there can be no justification for the way the paparazzi have behaved. They've behaved in a ridiculous manner. And it's not for the first time. They've been doing it for decades. We all know what happened with Princess Diana. It was because of the paparazzi. So there's absolutely no justifying that. But when it comes to the royal family itself, and I think that's one of the reasons why the Sussex's popularity has been falling in Britain, is that, look, it's one thing to do a single interview and put your side of the story or two, but it now seems that this is becoming an entire industry, right? The interviews, the Netflix series, now this book, presumably another book will come out, maybe a movie. It's almost beginning to seem like an organized way to keep telling their story and commercially benefit from it.
Well, I would say 6 hours of Netflix and a couple of hours with Oprah and this book is just a drop in the bucket compared to the thousands of inches of text and copy that have been given to the tabloids about this family, about the Sussexes, about the millions, probably, I can't count how many hours, have been given to talk shows where the commentators on TV shows for years now have dedicated time to just sullying the Sussex name. And so, if you compare the numbers of hours and the numbers of pages that the tabloids and tabloid TV have, spent on this family, the fact that they want to give 8 hours in a book to talk about it from their perspective is just tiny in comparison.
How do you see public opinion panning out? Because right now, public opinion in Britain has gone very anti-Harry and Meghan. And of course, look, some of the comments that were made, Jeremy Clarkson, that infamous Game of Thrones illusion, which really was awful and got a record number of complaints out there, that seemed to swing the needle back a little bit in their favor. How do you see public opinion now looking at all of this?
Yeah, I think that the public very much sees proof over and over again that the press have done and continue to do and say terrible things about the Sussexes. And Jeremy Clarkson, the fact of his timing, that he had that editorial where he talked about staying up late at night, unable to sleep, because he's fantasizing about Meghan being stripped naked and marched through towns while people throw excrement at her. All he did was prove the point of what Meghan and Harry have said in their Netflix series, what they said to Oprah. He's just proven the point. So yeah, I don't think they're helping themselves, The Sun, by publishing editorials like that. I don't think the tabloid press is helping their case in the slightest right now. And as far as public opinion of Meghan and Harry, obviously the public is eating it up. Netflix, that was their #1 rated documentary series. And, not just this year, but of all time. And why was that? Because the public is interested.
So, yes, the public loves, whatever they may say, they love reading about the royal family, they love hearing the royal family, they love watching The Crown, they love watching the Netflix series. But that's not the same as to say they're necessarily sympathizing, right? You may be watching something which you're not sympathizing with. If you look at the opinion polls, if you look at the popularity rankings, they've been dropping for Harry and Meghan Markle. I think Meghan is now only a little bit above Prince Andrew when it comes to popularity, and that's not really the place you want to be.
No, absolutely not. Nobody wants to be in the same sentence as Prince Andrew. That's very, very true. But sometimes I feel that Meghan and Harry are just being used as a distraction. And based on the clips that have been released of Harry speaking with Anderson Cooper on CNN on 60 Minutes, we see that, Harry talks about the family using the Sussexes as a distraction. He talks about the royals leaking stories to the press.
I hate to interrupt. I hate to interrupt you, but who is doing the leaking right now? Who are the people who are actually out there doing the talking? The family isn't doing it. The family is not saying much. You're saying they're leaking it. Okay, possible. But the family is not saying much. But the interviews, the Netflix documentaries, this book, right now it seems as if it is the Sussexes who are out there doing all the talking and in excruciating detail.
Oh, well, as you said, the Sussexes are actually speaking in a forthright manner. When leaks are being made to the press, it's not forthright. It could very well be members of the staff working for Charles or for William or whatnot, but leaks don't usually receive credit. Harry and Meghan at least are taking credit for their words and for their stories.
Okay, Kristen Meiser, thank you so much for joining us. A real pleasure listening to you. Thank you so much. Okay, it's now that time of the show where I keep my promise and introduce you to our special guest tonight. His name is Rishi Rajpopat. Sounds familiar? Well, Rishi has solved a 2,500-year-old Sanskrit puzzle. 2,500 years old, let that sink in. It was a grammatical problem, one that Sanskrit scholars have been trying to crack since the 5th century. How did Rishi Rajpopat manage to solve it? Well, we're going to be asking him that in just a couple of minutes. Rishi is a student at the University of Cambridge, and Cambridge could not be more proud. It is calling Rishi's discovery revolutionary. We are going to let Rishi explain why. Welcome to Beyond Rishi. Welcome to This World. Let's just help us understand this. You're probably the best person to do it. This particular puzzle has been around from the very beginning, right? Basically since the 5th century BC. So it's a 2,500-year-old puzzle.
Yeah, I mean, why has it been around since then? Because starting with the very first commentator, it has been misinterpreted, this very key rule of Panini's grammar. So that's where it becomes a puzzle, really. So he wrote his commentary. The first commentator wrote the commentary within about 200 years of the writing of the Ashtadhyayi. Now these are very speculative dates, of course, but this is what one prominent timeline suggests.
You know, Rishi, we get all excited when we solve yesterday's Wordle puzzle or when we solve some major solution to a problem that's been around. In science, people get excited when they solve a mathematical puzzle that's 100 years old. You've solved a puzzle that probably dates back to the 5th century BC. So is this the oldest puzzle that had to be solved right now in the world of academia?
Well, I'd have to check how old the other puzzles are and how many still remain unsolved. But what I can tell you, Vikram, is that there are many more puzzles, I'm sure, both in the world of Sanskrit literature and outside of Sanskrit literature that remain unsolved. And I think it's only a matter of time that the next generation, especially the youths of our country, will definitely try their hand at some of these and solve a good portion of those, hopefully.
For all of us who are not completely sure what this means, if you could explain this to us in words of one syllable, what exactly was it that was a puzzle? Was it a puzzle or was it a misunderstanding of the rules of Sanskrit? What exactly did you do or figure out?
So Panini wrote this grammar of Sanskrit, which is called the Ashtadhyayi. It was written around 500 BC or so. This grammar has got 4,000 rules. Now, what these 4,000 rules do is essentially they help you derive any word and subsequently sentence of Sanskrit. Panini's taught us one rule, which we call a meta rule, because it helps us deal with the meta issues of the grammar. And this meta rule helps us decide which of these two rules must be chosen. And that rule is 1.4.2, Book 1, Chapter 4, Rule 2. vipratishede param karyam. Now that rule, starting with the very first commentator, was misunderstood. Actually, the very first commentator, Katyayana, was familiar with two interpretations of that rule, and unfortunately he picked the wrong one, and the rest of the tradition followed all the way up to until very recently.
So, Simon, you're saying Panini had the right rule, it was misunderstood by the commentators later, which is why there's been a clash and why no one's been able to figure this out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, several scholars have worked on this problem and they've made interesting contributions. But what I did is I said we have to rely on Panini alone, because we have to take only his word as seriously as I mean, we cannot take the word of anyone else that came later as seriously as Panini's.
All right, Rishi, before you go, tell me a little bit more about yourself. You did an undergraduate degree in economics, right? And then you got a master's in Sanskrit from Oxford and a PhD now in Sanskrit from Cambridge. All of this shifting from economics to Sanskrit. Where do you go from here?
So I had studied Sanskrit in high school, and I was very fascinated with it. And now I realize I'm fascinated with classical Indo-European languages, more broadly speaking. So I'd done Sanskrit in high school, and towards the end of class 12, I was told by a friend of a friend that there's this lady who lives very close to where I do in Mumbai, who teaches Panini's grammar for at no charge whatsoever. And she's a retired professor herself from Gujarat. And I thought, this sounds very curious. I thought, let's go try it out, because we've done Sanskrit for so many years in high school. Let's see what this is about. I knew that Panini had written this grammar, but I did not know much about the grammar. Started going to that class, and I went to that class throughout the tenure of my undergraduate education in economics. And towards the end of the second year of my undergrad, or perhaps around the beginning of the third year, I was fairly sure that I was enjoying Panini's grammar a lot more than economics.
All right, so we wish you all the best, and with that, we would also like to take your leave on this. It's a wrap on the first episode of This World. Write to us with your feedback. We'd love to hear from you, the sort of stories you'd like us to do, and we will meet you again next week with some of the most important and interesting global stories. I'm Vikram Chandra. You're watching WION. World is One, India's first and only global news channel.